I think we're recording now. You can say that again now. So if there's anything that goes wrong, it's not people don't think it was Lauren.
We're running this ship without Lauren today, so make sure you express patience. And then Troy, will you mute everyone and I will get us started? All right, I'm going to start the meeting, and here is the bell. For our meeting today, I am going to turn it over right away to past club president Bill Houston, who is also a captain with the U.S. Marines. So please join me in this very special Veterans Day commemoration. Bill, there you go. And now we see you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for this honor. I've been asked to do this a few years, and I'm very honored when I have a return invitation. To get started, I want to do a little history on why Veterans Day, actually originally Armistice Day, came about. World War I started in 1914 and ended in 1919. Turns out America didn't get into it until 1917. But during that time, that war cost 1,700,000 lives total. And it finally ended in 1919 with a signature on the Versailles Treaty. And the date was the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1919. And Woodrow Wilson declared that it should be called Armistice Day to honor those Americans that paid the supreme cost by losing their lives and also served in World War I. And America, when we got into it big time, and our main thrust was to back the English. But that is a little bit of history. The name was changed by Congress in 1954 to the term Veterans Day. And I simply like to remind people, and everybody is pretty sure of this, thank veterans for their service, but please reverently remember all the lives that have been given in American wars since the beginning of this country in 1776. I'm ready to go to here.
Troy, are you going to put up the slides, or do you want to give me rights? And there you go. Okay.
There we go.
Thank you, sir. So next slide.
The next slide is the United States Air Force. We'll go through each branch of the service alphabetically. United States Air Force. Actually, the Army began some military flying as early as 1907, when the first airplanes the Wright brothers sold was to the U.S. Army. They went along until 1926, when the U.S. Army Air Corps was established, and the U.S. Army Air Corps actually fought World War II on the behalf of the United States. The Air Force as we know it today was founded in 1947 with the formation of Strategic Air Command under the command of Curtis LeMay. Their main mission is air superiority and fundamental world coverage of safety for the United States of America.
Next branch is.
The next branch, the United States Army. The oldest branch of any of the services is the United States Army. It was founded July 14th, 1775. And that's why we still recognize Flag Day as July 14th. Their flag was on a yellow flag with a rattlesnake on it in the middle of the flag, and it said, "Do not tread on me." This was the original Revolutionary Army commanded under George Washington, and it's evolved all the way to where we are today. The main function of the Army was the defense of America and her liberties, quote, end quote. It's been stated that the scoreboard of any war is the land. So in order to win a war, you had to control the land. And that's been kind of the assignment of the U.S. Army in their history, is to land and go in and control the land and take over the enemy. That's it. United States Coast Guard. United States Coast Guard began as the Merchant Marine, and later it was named the Coast Guard. It's the primary agency that protects our property at seas. So their main function is to protect life, property at sea. Their first charge is enforce maritime laws, protect ships and ports, and reserve rescue at sea. And that's still one of their main missions. One of my poignant moments in Rotary was 2 years ago, and you might remember this. We didn't have a member that belonged to the Coast Guard. So we asked, why am I not thinking? Darlene Mast to bring the flag in and join the vets on the stage. And I did this because I learned her father had fought in World War II and was a Coast Guard. So Lauren's grandfather and Darlene's father served in World War II, and it was very poignant to see her bring in the flag and stand with the veterans.
Right here, Bill.
United States Marine Corps is the second oldest branch. The Marine Corps was founded November 10th, 1775 in Tunn's Tavern, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Day before yesterday, on Tuesday, was the 245th birthday of the United States Marine Corps. Our motto is Semper Fidelis, which basically means always loyal, faithful to the Corps. One of the best ways to understand the Marine Corps is if I could quote the first stanza of the Marine Corps hymn. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, we will fight our country's battles on land, air, and sea. First to fight for right and freedom and to keep our honor clean. We are proud to bear the title, United States Marines. United States Navy. The United States Navy was founded in 1805. It turns out we were beginning to do trade in the Mediterranean, and the Barbary pirates were overcoming our ships, killing our crews, whatever. So Thomas Jefferson got appropriations for 5 Navy ships, which were formed, sailed into the Mediterranean, and overcame the Barbary pirates. And that's where the Battle of Tripoli came, and that's why the name Tripoli is in the Marine Corps hymn. The Navy is one of the most important branches of our entire system. It was once said, Thomas Morrison, the great naval historian, said that because this country has shores on both ends of the country and 2 separate seas, that helped our trade, it helped our growth, and helped and necessitated having a strong worldwide Navy to protect the United States and our entity. Within the Navy is a very strong military force called the SEALs. That stands for sea, air, and land. And as we know, it's rather a unique, hard-hitting, quick to move amphibious force that can attack and put out small fires before they get started. The last is, and there isn't a thing for it because actually this hasn't happened, but it has been officially formed as a 6th branch called the Space Force. And it sounds like the headquarters will be in Colorado Springs, and its intent will be to at least guard the outer space so that we couldn't be attacked by, or at least stay up to speed against any possibility of war in space. What you have here is a picture of the vets, what we did at the DAC when we were there. Each vet would bring in his color, and then we would stand at the end and do the Pledge of Allegiance, which I'm going to do in just a moment. But what I'd like to conclude with these thoughts. There are 6 services that comprise soon to be 5 services that comprise soon to be 6. They'll be the strongest peacekeeping force in the world, the United States of America. Thanks to the people that have served, and thanks for those that have given the supreme sacrifice, keeping our peace and freedom. With that, I'd like to start the pledge and ask that you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And my parting statement is, please remember, freedom is not free. Somebody has to pay to keep freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. That was beautiful. And what a wonderful way to commemorate Veterans Day through our online Zoom meeting. So thank you so much. That was quite moving. I would like to introduce Don Lewis, who is retired General Counsel of Ball Corporation, for our inspirational moment.
Thank you, President Debbie. I'd like to acknowledge the service of the veterans in our club and veterans in general. Thank you for your service and the protection of our right to a secret ballot election in the United States, which is the subject of my inspirational moment today. I draw inspiration from the common experience that we as Americans and Coloradoans experience in our right to a secret ballot election periodically in our country. First, we have the opportunity to vote. We share that with about 239 million other Americans and about 4.2 million Coloradoans that are eligible to vote. We also share the experience of actually voting. And in this past election, approximately 161 million of us were able to vote in a secret ballot election. No one knew how we voted unless we told them. Secondly, there were about 3.3 million Coloradoans that voted in this last election. And these votes were important. When I voted, I was able to vote on federal, executive, and legislative offices and issues. I was able to vote on US and Colorado constitutional issues. I was able to vote on the local district attorney that is in my district, helping enforce the law. And I was able to vote on whether or not to retain Colorado judges at many, many different levels of the judicial system here in Colorado. We share these fundamental values, and I hope that you find this common experience as inspiring as I do. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Next, we have Troy Szymanski, our club secretary, who's also partner and fund manager of Outpost Fund, for our secretary report.
All right. Thank you very much, President Debbie. First off, I'm going to pull up some birthdays that we have to celebrate for this week. So if everybody would join me in wishing Diana, Thomas, Lisa, and Peg Johnston all a happy birthday. And then one more that we missed, it was Mike Deneen's birthday on November 3rd, which we didn't have a meeting, and we didn't have a meeting following. So happy belated to you, and happy birthday to all of you. I would also like to thank all of our guests for joining. In the interest of time, we don't have the ability to go through and welcome you all individually. So a welcome from Denver Rotary Club 31. Some announcements. The office will remain closed this week while Lauren is on vacation, and will reopen this Monday. If you need assistance before then, please continue to reach out to President Debbie or myself, Troy Szymanski. We will not have a virtual happy hour meeting this evening, so there will be a link to it in this week's meeting recap email. Please disregard that. We've decided to postpone until next week. I do want to call attention to the email that President Debbie sent out earlier this week. We will be canceling the in-person portion of the November 19th meeting next week. So it'll be on Zoom as usual. Please join us and share your thoughts and questions at our Quest 31 Town Hall discussions. Town Hall dates are tomorrow, November 13th from noon to 1 p.m. and this Monday, November 16th from 3 to 4 p.m. Zoom links are provided in the meeting recap email. As you know, the importance of the DRCF is paramount and serves as the financial driver in order to fund our charitable organizations focused on youth and education initiatives and the World Community Services Committee. We have 3 trustees whose terms are expiring at the end of the 2020 full year. They are Wynn Gandera, Jack Green, and Harriet Downer. In order to fill these positions, the DRCF Trustee Nominating Committee has been formed, and the members are DRCF Trustees Bill Houston and Alan Friedberg, at-large members Sandy Adams and Gary Schrank, as well as DRC Board of Directors Chris Peters and Colleen Kozad. During the next 2 weeks, the committee will meet to nominate the new DRCF trustees. The nominees will be announced to the club on November 26th, followed by a vote to affirm the nominees at our annual meeting on December 10th. In addition to the identification of the DRCF Trustee Nominating Committee, a Rotary Club of Denver Board of Directors Nominating Committee has also been formed. This nominating committee represents a range of membership terms and includes Bill Immig, Michelle Maldonado, John Finnegan, Seth Patterson, and Peg Johnston. This group will meet in the coming weeks to identify a slate of board of director candidates who will serve a 3-year term beginning July 2021. Thank you to this group for their commitment to and participation in this process. A Rotary District Day of Service has been announced for Saturday, December 5th. Look for upcoming announcements on signing up for one of 3 offerings. First, we have the Cherry Creek Trail Cleanup, led by Andrew Walker. We have the Metro Caring Provisioning, led by Lisa Goulias and Mark Whipper. And Project Cure, led by President Debbie Beasley, which will actually be on Monday, December 7th. Denver Kids is hosting their Loving Local fundraising gala this weekend. President Debbie will put in chat the link for you to check it out and donate. This is a virtual event, so please join this event. Our very own Ebony Lashea will be honored with a Community Impact Award. See Michelle Maldonado or Debbie Beasley for additional information. Please keep Luis Westphal in your thoughts. Luis underwent hip replacement surgery this week, so please drop her a card if you can. And finally, a shout out of thanks to Rob Clinton for organizing the special program hosted by the Denver Council of Foreign Relations. Rotarians were invited to this special program on the consequences of the US election for the Transatlantic Alliance with Constance Stelzenmuller, who is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. This program was awesome, as one Rotarian put it. So thank you, Rob, for all your work on making this happen. That is going to be it from me. Back to you, President Debbie.
Thank you, Troy. Next, I'd like to introduce Steve Mast, past club president and retired director of business development with W.H. Smith, who will lead us in our memorial resolution for Phil Pankey.
Thank you, President Debbie. Good afternoon, family members of Phil Pankey, fellow Rotarians and guests. We pause today to present this memorial resolution in memory and celebration of the life of our friend and fellow Pankey. Let me first recognize the family members and friends of Phil who have joined us today. Phil's son, Ralph Pankey, and his wife, Susan, and daughter, Tori of Windsor, Colorado. Phil's daughter, Jill Pankey Shear, and her husband, Scott of Littleton. Scott's father has been a longtime member of the Littleton Rotary Club. Also joining us, well, supposed to join us, not able to, but was our good friend, Bob Martin, who is a member and past president of the Highlands Ranch Rotary Club. Bob and his wife, our past president, Sue Fox, were longtime friends of Phil's. As a matter of fact, Phil introduced Sue to our club. Phil was born in Harrisburg, Illinois. He graduated from the University of Colorado with a BS in 1951 and an MS in 1956. And on this Veterans Day, it should be noted that Phil served in the Navy from 1953 to 1958 and as a lieutenant commander in the Naval Reserve, Naval Reserve until 1977. He joined the Rotary Club in 1958. Phil was the founder and owner and president of Medical Administration Company, a billing and accounting service for doctors and dentists. He sold his company in 1976. In looking through Phil's membership file, I wasn't surprised to see recommendation letters for Phil describing him as, quote, a young man of sterling character and pleasing personality, end quote, and, quote, a young, successful, and very industrious worker on anything to which he set his mind, end quote. And the credit bureau report that the club got from the Associated Credit Bureaus of America stated that the, quote, subject is well regarded by all informants, end quote. And I was pleased to see that he paid his admission fee of $100 and his first quarter's dues of $25.96. Inflation's affected that a little bit. As many of you remember, in August of 2018, we celebrated Phil's 60 years of perfect attendance. Phil remained a member of the club even after moving to Mexico, where he actively participated and made up missed meetings at the Rotary Club of Manzanillo. Of course, he could not celebrate 60 years of perfect attendance without first celebrating his 50-year anniversary with the club in May 2008. Phil was a member of the Rotary for a total of 62 years, was a Denver Rotary Club Foundation, page 2, Rotary Foundation Paul Harris Fellow +1, and it contributed to our club centennial project. The player statue outside Coors Field. He was also a club board member and a club secretary for President Press Smith. In addition to serving on the club board, Phil was also a board member for the Denver Athletic Club and was instrumental in forming our 35+ year meeting location with them. In addition to Phil's love and commitment to Rotary, he was also committed to the people and small businesses of Colorado when he served as a state representative for House District 38, Littleton, from 1983 to 1998. During his tenure, Phil received the Lawmaker of the Year award by the Record publication in 1996, the National Federation of Independent Business Guardian of Small Business Award in 1998, and in 2009, he received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Denver Athletic Club, just to name a few. During one of his award presentations, it was mentioned, Phil was chosen for his dedicated work standing up on behalf of the average citizen and against special interests. I met Phil through Denver Rotary when he was a House representative. I fondly remember him hosting Darlene's and my kids, Brian and Lauren on the House floor. Phil let them sit in his chair and explained the political process to both. It was an honor to have known Phil and witnessed his dedication to Rotary and the good things we can do. He will be dearly missed by Rotary in Denver and the Manzanillo communities. Madam President and fellow Rotarians, I move for the adoption of this resolution for Phil Pankey by a standing vote of the membership and others present.
Thank you, Steve. Go ahead.
No, nothing.
Okay, thank you, Steve. That was a wonderful tribute to a wonderful Rotarian. I've asked Harriet Downer to include the link to Red Buckets in our chat today. So lots of good news to celebrate today. Hopefully you'll take advantage of that link and donate. At this time, I'd like to introduce Bill Emick, who will introduce our program speaker. Bill is a DRCF secretary and trustee, and he's a retired lawyer and lobbyist. Bill?
Thank you, President Debbie. Eric Sondermann is a writer, political, and media consultant, and Colorado's leading nonpartisan political commentator. Politicians, political parties, lobbyists, media, and the general public rely on his insightful and reliable observations. He writes a weekly column on politics for Colorado Politics magazine and the brand new Denver newspaper, the Denver Gazette. He's a regular panelist on the weekly Colorado Inside Out program on Channel 12 and is regularly called upon as a go-to source of independent political insight by a laundry list of media outlets across the state and the nation. He's universally respected for his candor, his analysis that's independent from spin. A true civic leader, Eric has chaired the boards of the Colorado I Have a Dream Foundation, the Logan School, Roots Elementary, and Catapult Leadership. He's served on the boards of Urban Peak, the Colorado League of Charter Schools, Colorado Public Radio, the Children's Museum of Denver, Judaism Your Way, and the Colorado Symphony. Eric and his wife, Tracy Dunning, divide their time between Denver and Tabernash. They're the parents of 2 grown children. It's a real pleasure to welcome back Eric Sondermann to the Denver Rotary Club. Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bill. That was a very, very kind introduction. It's good to be back with all of you. I feel like a recidivist here. You can't get rid of me. You keep having me back on a periodic basis. Given that elections tend to happen in early November, right before Veterans Day. This is not the first Veterans Day celebration that I participated in with this club, and it is always moving and well done, and I add my tribute. And I also remember, I wasn't around the Capitol that much during those years, but I certainly remember Representative Phil Pankey, and was glad to be witness to your very nice tribute to him. So as if we all hadn't had enough politics for the past many months, and then the last 8 or 9 days post-election, where it is still 24/7, particularly if you watch any kind of cable news. We'll explore some more politics here. Let me try to take a grand tour of what happened, what it means, maybe some original insights that we're not all reading in the newspaper and seeing on TV regularly these days. Looking both forward and backward. We'll start at the federal level, then go to the state and local level, but I will do my best to allow plenty of time for some Q&A and dialogue to follow. This is not the election that most of us thought would be in store here. All of the pundits, and we can talk about why the polls were again off, not for the first time, but everyone thought that this would be a much larger margin against Donald Trump, against President Trump, and that it would have many more ripple effects down the ballot. So in no way was this the election that we anticipated. To my mind, it was really a tale of 2 different elections and 2 different voting methodologies. We had, in Colorado's the outlier to that, because in Colorado, we're used to voting by mail. It's the norm here. It's the way it's done. And it works rather seamlessly and efficiently and securely and reliably. But around most of the country, voting by mail, particularly in the midst of a pandemic, was rather new. The numbers increased from 4 years ago. I believe less than 1 out of 5 voters nationally cast their ballot earlier by mail. And this time, north of 50% did so. So that is a huge sea change in voting methodology. So you really had 2 elections, one which happened on election day, where people showed up the old-fashioned way in much of the country, showed up at your polling place, stood in line, filled out a ballot or clicked levers on the voting machine or whatever. The second methodology, which was really the only one in Colorado, but the second one for most of the country, was to vote early around your kitchen table and stick it in the mail or use other early voting methodologies. When we all tuned in on election night, the tale of those 2 elections became readily apparent. in some states, I'll single out Ohio as an example, they counted the early votes first, the mail-in votes first. And that led a lot of people, and I'll plead guilty to that myself, to draw some erroneous conclusions based on how well Joe Biden was doing among some unusual populations, how well he was doing in the suburbs of Columbus, how well he was doing in a whole lot of categories, and then to extrapolate what that might mean for other states, given that Ohio can be something of a bellwether. Well, sure enough, an hour or two later, after all of those mail votes were cast, then Ohio went to tabulate the day of votes, and all of Biden's advantage or even his competitiveness evaporated quickly, and Ohio again became Ohio, and Donald Trump carried the state by the same solid 8 points that he had carried it by 4 years prior. Now, what we're seeing in these other states that everyone is so focused on now, whether it's Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, etc., Nevada, is the opposite of that. These are states that counted the actual day of vote first and then went back and counted all of the mail votes. There's not a right or wrong way to the sequencing of it. It's just that some states did it one way, some states did it the other way. And in those states that count the mail votes secondly, obviously it was going to look like Trump had a large lead, in many respects an illusory lead, and then that lead would get narrow and narrower and narrower, and in many cases eventually disappear as all those mail ballots were counted. Again, there's not a right way or a wrong way. It's just the nature of the beast, particularly given that this is new technology, new methodology for so many states. To the outcome of this election, I think this was just a country that in many respects was exhausted, and by a rather thin margin. The way I describe this election is line up 29 people, and out of those 29 people, random 29 people, 15 out of those 29 voted for Joe Biden, and 14 out of those 29 voted for Donald Trump. That is a pretty thin majority. Now, if you flash back 4 years ago, Donald Trump won this election, even though losing the popular vote handily. He won the White House by very narrow margins in 3 key states. He won Wisconsin by roughly 20,000 votes. I think it was 23,000. He won Michigan by just over 10,000 votes, and he won Pennsylvania by about 40,000 votes. So we had a very close election 4 years ago. In this case, we had also a close election, not quite as close as 4 years ago, but also a close election. But instead of coming in on the north side of those razor thin margins in those key states, Donald Trump came in on the south side, on the losing side, again, of very thin margins, 14,000 votes approximately in Georgia, 20,000 some votes in Nevada, currently and still counting maybe 15 or 18,000 some votes in Arizona, etc. So in some respects, very little changed from 4 years ago to this year. Most voters who were Trump voters 4 years ago were again Trump voters. Most voters who were Hillary Clinton voters 4 years ago were Joe Biden voters a week ago. But so even though very little changed, and most blue states are still blue states, most red states are still red states, in some respects everything changed because we are a narrowly divided country, and enough demographic groups changed, and we can go into specific demography if you want, but there was enough change to change that map. And the map changed really in 3 main ways. Number one, you had in our neighboring state of Arizona, which has long been a Republican stronghold. And again, it hasn't, some networks, Fox and the Associated Press have called it, some haven't yet called it, but you would much rather be Joe Biden than Donald Trump in terms of as that Arizona count gets to be finalized. You have a southern state, a deep southern state, the heart of the Confederacy state in Georgia that changed, and that is a notable change with long-term implications. And then you had those 3 quote unquote blue wall states in the upper Midwest, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, that gave Donald Trump the presidency. And this time they took the presidency away, again by thin margins, but enough margins for Joe Biden to do business. in terms of all the challenges, recounts and whatever, I think we need to be clear about that. Obviously, there is no one who disputes that every legal, legitimate vote should be counted, and illegal, illegitimate votes should obviously not be counted. No one disputes that. But I think now, as we sit here 9 days post-election, we are fast approaching, if we already haven't passed, what I sort of call put up or shut up time, in terms of all the allegations, many of them rather wild and spurious, that are out there in terms of mass voting fraud. If there is any evidence, solid evidence of significant voting fraud, particularly significant enough to have made a difference in a key state here, by all means, the courts ought to consider that, and the courts ought to do the right thing. But absent that evidence in a timely way, we have a long honored, I mean, it is, we just did in this club a Veterans Day celebration. There is a long time honored tradition in this country, the peaceful transfer of power. We are living in an incredibly dangerous and perilous time. We have an epidemic raging, and it is particularly raging these days throughout the land. And the notion of not giving the apparent president-elect a normal transition, or of not having Republican leaders go down to the White House and at some point have a hard conversation with the president, and no matter what his emotional or psychological state is, letting him know that the time has come to pass the torch, and to pass the torch gracefully. We're living in a perilous time, and I think we are compounding that perilous time by some of the big behavior that we have seen post-election. Let's turn quickly, because I know our time is limited, to the US Senate. That was the other big surprise of this election. It was not only supposed to be not just a Biden victory, but in many respects a Biden wave, a Biden semi-landslide, and for it to have ripple effects all the way down the ballot, the US Senate and Congress. And not only wasn't the Biden win nearly as big as anticipated, but it had no ripple effects. And if anything, it had opposite to ripple effects. The United States Senate, which a lot of people projected was 75 or 80% likely to turn to Democratic hands, is apparently not turning to Democratic hands. The Democrats really needed to gain 4 seats in the US Senate to tip that, assuming a Biden victory, so that Vice President Harris would break ties. And that's because they were 3 down, but the Democrats were sure to lose the Alabama seat, which they indeed did lose. So instead of picking up 4 seats, the Democrats picked up a grand total of 2 seats. One of them here in Colorado, the Hickenlooper victory, comfortable victory over Cory Gardner, and the other one in neighboring Arizona. But all the other seats that many smart people thought would tip Democrats' way, they didn't tip. And in many cases, they weren't even close. Susan Collins, who was supposedly beleaguered in Maine, won by 9 points. Joni Ernst in Iowa, I haven't checked the final numbers, but I think she won by 5 or 6 points. Steve Daines in Montana, a comfortable margin. Lindsey Graham, who the Democrats had, really in their sights in South Carolina, which was always going to be a stretch given the nature of South Carolina. Lindsey Graham won that race by double digits. Yes, I know Democrats are now saying, but we have 2 runoff elections come the first week of January in Georgia. And yes, that is true. If the Democrats could replicate their success from last week in Georgia and win both of those runoff elections, then you would have a 50-50 tie in the Senate. I guess my advice to you, and I'm not a big betting man, but I'm not sure I would bet that. I think Georgia is definitely tipping, and Georgia politically 5 years from now will not look like the Georgia any of us remember. But to replicate that kind of turnout that we just saw, to replicate that in early January is going to be tough. And this election will be presented, it will be messaged to the people of Georgia as sort of the last vanguard, the last stand against having Democrats. And they won't be focusing on Joe Biden, they'll be focusing on Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and others. So the last firewall, if you will, against having Democrats run all the levers of government. So anyway, pundits and prognosticators have been wrong frequently this year, and I may well be wrong again. But it says here that it's going to be tough for Democrats to pull off those 2 Georgia victories, which they desperately want, but are not likely to get. On the House side, the U.S. Congress, Democrats thought at worst they would hold their own. Maybe at best they would pick up another half dozen or more seats to pad their advantage in the House. And in fact, the opposite happened. There's still a couple races out there that haven't been called, but Republicans are going to gain the better part of a solid dozen seats. Yes, Democrats will still run the House. Yes, Nancy Pelosi, should she want it, will still be Speaker of the House, but the margin is now getting to be a very thin margin in the House. It is not the comfortable margin Democrats enjoy. So the way I described it in the column that I wrote yesterday, I think it's running this afternoon or tomorrow in the different publications I write for, is that this was sort of a half a loaf election. No side got everything, but both sides got something. For Democrats, they got the White House by all apparent indication. And given the role that Donald Trump has occupied in Democratic psyches and in Democratic nightmares for the last 4 years, they excised that demon. But they didn't get the Senate. They didn't pad their advantage in the House. And we will have divided government in this country, continuing divided government, again, barring the unforeseen in Georgia. In terms of where both of these parties are, it leaves both of these parties in a conundrum. Let me start with the Democratic Party really quickly. Democrats have had this rare, remarkable degree of unity for the past several years. And that unity has been a function of one factor, which is that they've been united in opposition to all things Donald Trump. Well, as Donald Trump exits the presidency a couple months from now, all of a sudden that unifying force for Democrats goes away. And all of the fissures or cleavages within the Democratic Party between the ultra progressive wing and the more centrist wing, all of those are going to come to the fore, and they're going to come to the fore quickly. And President-elect Biden, soon to be President Biden, will be forced to referee a lot of those disputes between that activist wing and the more long-term centrist wing of the party. And some of those battles are going to get brutal, and they're going to get noisy, and they're going to get loud. And it will be interesting to see how they play out through this presidency and over time. On the Republican side, I actually would suggest, and I'm sure there are people of all different political loyalties on this Zoom, I would actually suggest that in some respects, this is the worst of all worlds for Republicans. You do not have Donald Trump continuing for a second term in the White House, but you also, on the other hand, don't have him repudiated by a large margin. So if he chooses to, and every indication is he probably will, he will still be the 800-pound gorilla in the Republican Party. He'll still sit astride that party. He'll dominate the party. And he'll make it very make it very difficult for the Republican Party to sort of move on and take the next steps and incorporate some of the best of Donald Trump's messaging. And he's been a master at messaging, and he has been a master at targeting specific demographic groups that have not traditionally voted Republican. So, but as long as he remains the 800-pound gorilla, there is a lot of younger new talent in that party that will continue to be cowed and rendered mute by Donald Trump, and will continue to have trouble rising to the surface to be the next face and the next voice of that party. And that's my quick overview. Again, we could talk all afternoon on the federal government. Real quickly on the state government, on Colorado politics. I mean, if there was any doubt, and I don't think there was any doubt, Colorado has done its transition. It is now a rather quite reliably blue state. I've sometimes been famous for sound bites as to where Colorado is on the color wheel at any point in time. I think several years ago, I commented that it turned from purple to a periwinkle shade of blue, and then that periwinkle became a topaz or something. Well, these days, there's no periwinkle, there's no baby blue. This is an indigo blue, if you will. It's fast becoming a navy blue. Just look at some of the factors. I mean, when John Hickenlooper was reelected as governor, which is 6 years ago, his reelected to a second term as governor, he won that race by a little over 3 points. Fast forward 4 years, and Jared Polis is elected governor by 10.5 points. In the presidential race, Joe Biden carried this state by a full 14 points. That is not even competitive. Quite frankly, Cory Gardner exceeded my expectations. I figured that Cory Gardner would run 2 or 3 points better than Donald Trump. In the end, he ran 5 points better than Donald Trump, but that meant the difference between a 14-point loss and a 9-point loss, which is still a landslide loss. Running 5 points better than the standard bearer of the party, that works if the standard bearer of the party is losing by 4, and 5 points better means you win by 1. When the standard bearer of the party is losing by 14, beating him by 5 points means you still lose by 9. The Republican Party, I have a recent column to that effect, if anyone wants to check it out, needs some deep rethinking. I keep thinking after every election that maybe the Republican Party in Colorado has hit some kind of bottom, like an addict's kind of bottom, and is ready to do what is necessary to try to see better days. And yet election after election, the Republicans keep doubling down on what has caused them to fade and fail and fall so far. Yes, some will say, but what about Lauren Boebert over in Western Colorado, the new incoming congressperson from that 3rd congressional district? And to my sort of counterintuitive thinking, I would suggest that in many respects, Lauren Boebert is the best thing to happen to Democrats in Colorado. Because with Cory Gardner departing the scene, Lauren Boebert all of a sudden will become the face and brand of the Republican Party in Colorado. And that might work on the Western Slope, and that might give her a nice long stay in Congress if she wants it. But it is not going to change Republicans' fortunes in the Denver suburbs, in Jefferson County, Arapahoe County, Larimer County, Broomfield, Douglas County, run the list. That is not a brand that is going to work for the Republican Party. It's just not. Everyone talks about the Democratic strongholds, and they are obviously strongholds of Boulder and Denver and the ski towns. But what we've seen in these last couple election cycles is not the Democrats really building on their margins out of Denver and Boulder and Aspen and Vail. Those margins are staying rather steady. What we're seeing is that the Republican strongholds in this state, El Paso County, Colorado Springs, Douglas County, Weld County up in Greeley, etc., there is a real softening of the Republican margins in those counties. Yes, Republicans are still winning those counties. They're still electing Republican county commissioners and whatever, but they are no longer getting those gigantic margins to offset the Democratic margins come statewide races, the Democratic margins in the Boulders and Denvers of the world. So if there's any purple left in this state, it's in the softening of some of those traditionally red counties that are now becoming purple counties, while the blue counties get ever more blue. Ballot issues, let me just check my watch here. Let me wrap this up to leave some time. I would just suggest real quickly that the two most constant, there were a zillion ballot issues, everything from the popular vote to the silly initiative on reintroducing wolves, etc. The two that are of consequence that we're going to be talking about in 5 years in my mind are the paid medical and family leave ballot issue and the repeal of the Gallagher Amendment. Both are going to have major financial consequences. On the family and medical leave one, no one argues, no serious person argues with the good intent behind it. But the devil is always in the details. I've done some work over recent years trying to bring some fiscal sanity and reform to Colorado PARA, the Public Employees Retirement Association, which is a wonderful program for retirees, but financially it's deeply underwater. And I worry that this new medical family leave program will follow that same course and be another unfunded liability, unfunded burden on the voters of the state, despite its good intention. And then in Denver, we can continue these battles between the mayor and city council, with city council being resurgent and trying to flex their muscle, and they successfully did so, passing a couple of their favorite ballot issues to give them a little more power vis-a-vis Mayor Hancock and future mayors. But Denver remains a city in some crisis, and we'll see if even if there's a power shift going on, whether anyone has an answer to some of those crises. So with that, that's sort of my grand tour, and 20 minutes doesn't allow time for an adequate grand tour, but that's what I have for you today. It's good to be with you, and I would welcome, I think Debbie's fielding a few questions, and I would welcome them.
Let me get through the ones I can. So here's the first. If President Trump does not at least allow President-elect Biden to formally commence his transition soon, do you think any members of his administration have the courage to initiate an effort to invoke the 25th Amendment, or at least a prominent Republican, perhaps one that is not seeking office, will suggest such an effort in order to rattle a saber?
Wow, great question. Whoever asked that one, kudos to you. Loyalty has been in, courage and dissent have been in rather short supply in Republican ranks throughout this Trump presidency. So I'm not holding my breath for that to happen. I know Senator Langford, a conservative Republican from Oklahoma, came out yesterday and said that we have to get a transition underway. Maybe there will be some voices of courage. I'm personally waiting for Cory Gardner to be one of those voices. He's the most liberated person now in the US Senate. He doesn't have to please anyone. He has another 6-7 weeks left in his term. He can speak out. He can speak his mind. He no longer has to kowtow to that Trump base. But I sure haven't heard anything from Cory out of this. I flash back. A number of you are my age or even have a few years on me. I flash back to 1974 at the end of the Nixon presidency when that thing was falling apart. And you had three leading Republicans, Hugh Scott of Pennsylvania, John Rhodes of the House leader from Arizona, as well as Barry Goldwater, who went down Pennsylvania Avenue, went to the White House, and basically said, Mr. President, the gig is up. You have lost the support of Republicans in Congress. We can do this easy or we can do this hard, but the gig is up. And President Nixon resigned within 48 hours. I'm waiting for some comparable, it's not a similar situation, but some comparable delegation of Republicans to show the same backbone. I haven't seen it.
All right, next question. Will the representatives from the Electoral College still be able to cast a vote contrary to their state's mandate? And if so, what can be done ahead of time?
Yeah, I mean, there are these provisions that some people, I know Lindsey Graham was talking about it. It's crazy talk. Yes, state legislators ultimately have, in most states, the authority to appoint their electors. That is mostly just a routine function. The days where state legislators decide who the electors are, as opposed to the voters of the state picking those electors, those days ended well over 100 years ago, over 150 years ago. Pity any state legislator who's going to decide to jump in here and say, well, the voters of Pennsylvania or pick your state, they voted this way, but I know better, so we're going to send an opposite set of electors. That is crazy talk. Even the smart people around Trump aren't buying into that. It's not going to happen. A few people can write some crazy columns suggesting it as a theory, but it's theoretical only.
All right, and unfortunately, this will be our last question. In
Sounds
your
good.
opinion, was the vote influenced by the polls that predicted a Democratic sweep?
Good question. Yeah, the way I put it is, thank God for used car dealers always are thankful for politicians because there's somebody then lower on the pecking order than they are. And that's the way I feel as a pundit. I'm thankful for pollsters because there's somebody who missed it more than I missed it, and all of my class of people missed it. No, this was a huge high turnout election. And I don't really buy into the notion that the polls that showed a 7-8 point Biden victory really contributed to what turned out to be more of a 3 or 4 point Biden victory. There was huge turnout, but what a lot of people missed is it wasn't just huge anti-Trump turnout. It was huge anti-Trump turnout and pro-Trump turnout. The Democrats got their people out, but by God, the Trump campaign and the Republicans certainly found their people in numbers that they hadn't even found them 4 years ago and turned them out as well. So I'll be waiting to look at some numbers to maybe prove that point. But Debbie, that's not my gut. I don't think that the polls that exaggerated the magnitude of Biden's lead really contributed to the outcome.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Eric. Timely topic, of course, for this week and the last couple weeks. So thank you for your time.
Enjoyed it. Always good to be with you. Thank you.
Yeah. So in honor of your being with us today, we've made a donation to End Polio Now, which is a major Rotary campaign. And with that, we will eradicate 33 children around the globe against polio. And with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation 2-for-1 match, that will actually be 100 children. So thank you.
Thank
All right,
you.
next week's program will be Zoom only, and the speaker will be Dr. Rodriguez, clinical psychologist on COVID stress on first responders. So join us next week. And with that, please join me in reciting the Rotary 4-way test. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.